And welcome everyone. My name is Mel Luymes, and a little bit of an intro. This is just the very first of a 5-part session from the Timing Matters initiative. And each of these sessions is geared to a very specific type of manure so that we're not talking in generalities. And we're keeping it real by having lots of practical experience on the call today. So you'll hear from a farmer, a custom manure applicator, and an agronomist. And no session on manure would be complete without the manure girl herself. Chris Brown will be here too. And lastly, you'll hear from Soil and Crop about some on-farm manure trials they're running. So Timing Matters, if you've heard of it before, is an industry initiative. It's a partnership between farm organizations and OMAFRA to promote best practices for manure management. Timing obviously matters, as per the title. So we're also looking at the value of manure, storage options, and application equipment. And this partnership is coordinated by Farm and Food Care, but you also might be wondering what OPACA is. It's one of the newest acronyms in agriculture, and it stands for the Ontario Professional Ag Contractors Association, which I'm involved with, and it is an organization just for manure contractors and custom farmers. To have more of a voice, and we promote good stewardship to our members as well. And next up, we're just going to dive right into it. Janet Harrop is going to start us off, and just a short presentation that she's got. So if you've got questions, please just leave it to the end, or again, type it in your chat, and then Janet can see right then and there. So we'll have a bit of a discussion after her presentation before moving on to Andy De Vries, who's from CropQuest, Tony Roelofsen from Pit King, Chris Brown, obviously, and then we'll end with a soil and crop update. So, Janet, take it away.
Good morning, everybody. So my name is Mel said is Janet Harrop, and I farm with my husband, my son, and the daughter-in-law just outside of Fergus. So we have a conventional dairy farm with a parlor, milk twice a day, milk about 120 cows. And I got involved with nutrient management way back when the software was developed because we had some lodging and flat wheat fields. We were starting to see the potassium potash levels in our forages going up, and I wanted to have a better handle on what it meant as far as the nutrient balance that we had in our crops. We do an alfalfa, wheat, corn rotation, and we use as minimal till as we can. So if you go to the next slide, Mel.
Yep.
Great. So the AgriSuite software. So I use the AgriSuite software. It's currently being updated, and we'll go into that more a little bit later. But you basically enter all of your field information into the system, location, soil tests, crop inputs, where the property is. On the next slide. This is the upgraded version of AgriSuite that captures the same information, but they're in the process of updating the background software. So this will be the new look. This is a free software through OMAFRA. So this is the place where I spend some of my time, this soil test. So I put up here 2 different soil tests because, again, we wanted to get a bit of a sense as to what was going on in our fields. And as I said, we had flat wheat. And the first year that I entered the information into this software and started doing some of the work on my own, we ended up putting half the amount of nitrogen on in the following year. And actually, our yield was higher. So it was definitely a financial benefit to us. And the only other thing that we changed, and I have 2 soil samples up here, one from 2017 and one from 2020, so 3 years apart. You can see the pH has improved, and the organic matter went from 4.1 to 5. And the only thing that we really did in that period of time is we sold our plow. So we went away from the plow. We went to more minimal till. We started adding. After wheat, we went to added a fall rye that we tried to harvest in the fall, depending on the year, and again in the spring burned it down, and then put corn in. yeah, the only other thing we did was we started adding oats and peas as a cover crop that we took off before it went to bloom on our alfalfa fields. Next slide. Where I spend most of my time is on the field inputs page of the software. So you have multiple cropping years, you pick your cropping year, and if you go to the next page, Mel, you input all of your information as far as what you're putting on the field. We're talking about manure, so I'll speak specifically to some of the analysis, and this may be kind of small for some of you to see, but there's 4 different types of manure that we use on our farm. There is a liquid dairy manure, and we have a 3 lagoon settling lagoons. We have a flush system at our farm, and we primarily pull manure out of the first lagoon, which has the most amount of solids, and then the second lagoon we use on our, after we take a cut of alfalfa. It's got a higher water content, and especially at times of the year where we're wanting to add those really dry periods in the summer, there is benefit. So I found it rather interesting when I did the analysis of the 2 different kinds of manure that we have on our farm. Some of the nutrients you would think would be much higher, much lower when there's more or less water. But what I do is I take a look at these samples and look at the analysis of and the needs of the field, and then I can pick which field I want to use. Which manure I should say I want to use on that field. The other thing that we obviously have is we do have some sheep on a neighboring farm, and it has a significant different level of nitrogen and phosphorus. So again, depending on the nutrient needs of the field, we can use that. And then we did have some farms that were quite a piece away from the dairy operation, right off Highway 6, which is a bit of a hassle for transporting manure. So we have in the past used Fergus biosolids. So again, you can look and you can see that there's a significant difference in nutrient values of the different kind of manures, and you can tailor the application on the field based on the crop needs. So the next slide. So yeah, here's just the numbers, a little bit easier to read. So again, the 4 different kinds, you can see the dry matter, not a big difference in the liquid, but the amount of nitrogen, available nitrogen, percentage of phosphorus, and then the amount of potassium, and for dairy farms, potassium is a concern in forages, and you can tailor again based on the needs. So we usually, our application rate in the fall is usually about 5,000 gallons per acre of liquid. In the spring, it goes usually a little higher. And then sheep manure, and then the biosolids. And you can see the amount of actual pounds of the different nutrients that are provided. There's quite a difference. So particularly the potassium with the biosolids, if you have a field that you're finding your forage analysis of potassium starting to go up, using the biosolids is a good option. Next slide. So this is a busy slide, but this is the field input summary. So again, I have a field here. We put sheep manure on in the fall, put ryegrass in. This was after wheat. In the spring, we threw a bit of nitrogen on to get the ryegrass to grow, cut it off, put some liquid manure on, planted corn with a bit of starter fertilizer, a bit of nitrogen. And when you enter all of the information in here, all of the system in the background calculates all the flags of you're putting too much on, you're not putting enough on. The agronomic balance, it'll tell you you've exceeded a certain amount. And so if you want to put more on to be able to not only feed the plant you're growing, which is the agronomic balance, but you also want to account for the nutrients that are being taken, or agronomic balance for the soil, and then the crop removal, what you're taking out of the field when you pull that crop off the field. You do have some flexibility, and the minimum numbers for agronomic balance and the maximum numbers, including the crop that you're taking off, there's a fairly large window there. So it does give you lots of flexibility, whether you're going to meet a lot of your nutrient needs with manure, or you're going to need a lot of your nutrient needs with commercial fertilizer. So we did plant a field this past year of soybeans. In that field, I looked at our agronomic balance, looking at it. There was absolutely no need for any broadcast fertilizer before we planted in that field, and we were curious just to see how that was going to work out. And we had a 75 bushel yield on that field with not a granule of fertilizer applied. All the nutrients came from nutrients that we had on the farm through manure. Last slide now. So if you're interested in, again, Christine's going to go into the AgroSuite software a little bit more, but it is a free software that's downloadable. I did get certified as a agricultural operator, which does mean that if I did want to build something and I needed to develop a strategy to be submitted for a building permit or a plan, that I could do it myself. So the information learning was pretty valuable. You learn about the software. A lot of the stuff can now be done online. Certification lasts for 5 years, and the website link is there. If you want to look, if you don't, and you want to have somebody like Andy do this work for you, that's an option. But this is an option that for producers. And the thing I like is if I decide to change the crop I'm putting in and switch it to another crop, or I want to change the manure, we use this as a living management tool. So we can change things, we can change it on the fly, we can see the real numbers, and then we can move forward. So that's my presentation.
Thank you so much, Janet. We'll have a bigger discussion at the end of this. Next up, I want to introduce Andy de Vries, who's a partner with CropQuest, and they've got nutrient management planners all across Ontario, and he's going to talk about dairy manure from a standpoint of as a consultant and as an agronomist. So take it away, Andy.
Thank you, Mel. Thanks for having me on this program. I really enjoy this. So I'm not going to speak from a perspective of nutrient management this morning. That's Janet took a good shot at that. I'd like to speak to everyone on my personal experiences. I am a certified crop advisor and farm in partnership with my brother and my 2 sons and his son-in-law. We farm south of Mitchell, and we buy a lot of manure. So that's be the main part of my presentation here. So Mel gave me a few points to talk on here. So one of them was knowing the value of your manure. So we buy everything from broiler manure to dairy digestate and raw dairy manure, hog manure, and the way we value it is most of it is tanked by tanker truck to nurse tanks on the side of our farms and pumped from there through a drag line onto the farm. And most often it's after wheat harvest. That's when we have the best opportunity to apply that. And there's a huge variance in manure, and you have to know what it is you're putting on to put a value on it. So what we do is we'll pull samples every hour from a nurse tank and put it into a 5-gallon pail and make a composite sample, and we'll send it off to the lab, and then we pay based on the nutrient values. And so at that time of year, we're paying for the phosphorus and potash values, which on our website, we've created a 5-year rolling average for those nutrients. And I can tell you right now that the average is going to go up, because I haven't done the April 1st survey yet, but having purchased all of our stuff here about a month ago and asking around as to what it is today, that's going to go up. I'm guessing probably 10 or 15%, just because of the value of crop prices right now, and somehow that seems to always correlate to nutrient prices. So we're seeing a huge difference in the stuff we apply. For some examples, we had one farm, we were 3,000 head finishing barn. We were buying out of, we would pull the samples out of it, and the nutrient value of that ended up being less than the cost of trucking it, because they didn't have their watering systems adjusted properly. And that'll apply the same to dairy operations. However, whatever system you have for flushing or whatever, how much water ends up in those lagoons or tanks. When you're hauling water, you're not getting a whole lot of value. Yet on the other hand, we have operations that will apply 6,000 gallons per acre in August, and by the time I do the nutrient valuation on that, I'm paying $200 to $220 an acre for that. But I put enough nutrients on for the next 3 years, just on the concentration of that. So the next thing that Mel wanted me to talk about was the value of manure, and I'm just going to go make this really simple. And that's, I think the best way to explain the value of manure is you can do samples while you're applying, or take samples from your pit while you're stirring. The reason we take samples on an ongoing basis is because your concentration just changes so much on 5 or 6 hours of pumping. So you have to take an average sample. But the best way I can explain the real value of manure is obviously the macronutrients, the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potash. That's simple. But the real value of manure, and the way I explain it, is for livestock producers to look at their vitamin mineral premix ticket or menu. So when you're making rations with your vitamin mineral premixes, you'll see the sulfur and selenium and all those micros in there. Most times in most animals, that is utilized by about 35 to 40% at best. So 60 to 70% of that passes right through the animal and ends up in the manure. And that's probably the highest value of the manure. So it's hard to put a dollar figure on that, but as an edible bean grower, that's really what makes it rock, is the micronutrients. So that I just see a huge difference in that. So the other thing that really shows up is broiler manure. I don't know why the micros are so high on that, but that's another other thing. So the value of a consultant, not as a nutrient management consultant, but as an agronomist, I think that's where value can be proven. So I'll just again relate to my own experience. I have a bunch of clients, and of course our own land. So we'll take the soil test analysis and take the manure analysis, and people just ask me, so what's the highest return on what I can apply? And that's very simple for us to do. We give people recipes on, this is what you need. If you're going to put on 4,000 gallons of this is what else you need. And I write those recommendations every spring for a bunch of people, and that's what I think the value of a consultant is. You folks doing dairy farming, you got so many other things that you're concentrating on, husbandry and dairy management. This is just one area that's, if you're an agronomist, it's fairly simple to do. So we do a lot of that. So I'll just leave it open to the questions later on, and hopefully I can address some of those. Thanks, Mel.
Yeah. Well, we've got a question or two right now, Andy.
Okay.
In the chat, Brendan asked if you're paying for the manure and the hauling application cost, or is some of that transportation cost shared with the producer?
So the way we most often do it is the person selling the manure will pay for the hauling and spreading. So that's a very good question, because certain types of manure, you can't go any more than 5 or 6 kilometers round trip, and there's certain manures that you can travel 14, 15 kilometers round trip, and it has an economic return. But if you're certain types of manure, you can't go very far from it. So what we do see in some of my customers, like we have a large dairy operation close to us. The one thing, how should I explain it? So I had a client ask me a couple of months ago, they're looking to expand their dairy operation, and they want to build a barn, and the farm next door came up for sale, as it always does at an inopportune time. So they want to build a barn, and the farm next door comes up for sale. So we had a long discussion. I said, you should, the best way you can handle that is, never mind, don't bother with the farm next door. Make an arrangement with the guy that's going to buy it and cash cropper, and sell him the nutrients and get straw in return. When you're in the dairy business, you're not making money cash cropping land. You're making money producing milk. So there's all kinds of cash crop operations around that want to partner up with people that can supply nutrients close by. I think that's a far better economic solution than to try and buy more land these days. So that's just anyways.
And we've got another question in the chat too. But we're also wondering about this price list here, this nutrient price list. Is that pounds per acre? And is that just what commercial fertilizer costs, or is that how you would actually value manure?
Right. So when you take a manure analysis, a representative analysis, they will tell you how many pounds of N, P, and K are available per 1,000 gallons in a liquid form. And then we use this price table. So on April the 1st, I call 4 different suppliers within a 50-mile radius, and I ask them for a price for a fertilizer that an average operation, dairy or hog operation, would pay for a unit of nitrogen, a unit of available potash and phosphorus on an average for a 400 or 500 acre operation. So obviously, if you're farming 50 acres and you're just buying a little amount, or if you're farming a couple thousand acres, there's a variance in price. So we try to take an average for a 400 or 500 acre producer, and they've been really good about supplying that price. And then I would apply that to the table, and we make a 5-year rolling average.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, hardly anyone has their camera on, so I can't see some nods. But we're going to move on to Tony Roelofsen, who's a partner with Pit King in the Alma area that applies a lot of liquid manure. So we really want to hear from someone that has a lot of experience, what is the right equipment to get the job done? So Tony, take it away.
Hey, thanks, Mel. Good morning, all. Along with Ron Boltz, we operate a custom application business in the Drayton Alma area. We custom applicate liquid ASM and NASM products. I've been doing this for 30 years, and Ron has been involved for approximately 25 years. We've seen a lot of changes in the years of being involved in this business. Our equipment involves drag hose application, truck mount vacuum pressure tank application, and quad axle top load tanker applications. Presently, top dress application, or probably to the next one on the application. Yes. Top dress application is still the present norm for the ASM materials, as it is quick, efficient, and simplified way of applying. If you can pump it or vacuum it, we can spread it. We have a variety of pumps and mixers available to mix and blend liquid manure to a consistency that can be pumped, including Noon Crawler, Noon 8-inch, 12-inch pumps, Blue Lagoon pump, and Husky prop agitators. It's important to have a consistent product as you're doing the entire field, that you're getting the same values starting and finishing the field. The tankers also have agitation in the tanks to lift and disperse product when settling could occur in transport from the storage facility to the field. We've done a fair bit of design changes to our spreader plates to achieve consistency in the spread patterns. The one problem we do have, though, is wind. Wind creates a problem with the top dress bars, evenness of spread. Dry matter can also change the width and the pattern of the spread as well. Distance of pumping in a drag hose scenario can affect the flow rates with the drag hose system, but ground speeds with flow meters can easily be adjusted to compensate. Okay, next one, Mel.
Yep.
Yeah.
The dribble bar.
Dribble bar systems. We demoed the Vogelsang dribble bar Husky equipment had adapted to on one of their tanks. Did a great job with liquid hog dairy until we got into some heavy bedded dairy situations. Plugging of the drop tubes became an issue. They're 1.5 to 2-inch drop tubes. Now there are some different ones out there now with larger tubes. They seem to be working a bit better, but at this point we haven't tried that. Incorporation. Incorporation has similar results with plugging. We have an airway incorporation system for the drag hose with 2 of the trucks along with 2 of the Hool tanks equipped with Dietrich style injectors with closer attachments. The airway drops manure in front of the unit, incorporates it somewhat into the holes it pokes in the soil. We have found that in hay fields, it brings up a lot of stones to the surface. So we've kind of shied away from using it too much in hay fields. The Dietrich injector does a lot of soil disturbance, but with the closers give good placement and coverage of manure, reducing nutrient loss and odor. Weight of the units hanging on the back of the tankers can contribute to more soil compaction entering and leaving the field. Cost to incorporate or inject is greater as it slows the flows and there's greater equipment wear. Row crop.
Oh, sorry, I missed a slide for you.
Yeah, I guess we did. Okay. Okay. We don't offer ourselves, we don't offer in-row crop injection. The advantage would be to add nutrients to a growing crop. The cons would be the size of the tank along with the size of the field. And the application rate would have to coincide to minimize crop damage from entering, turning, and leaving the field. The coiler system, which has been promoted quite extensively, only destroys one or does damage on the one headland, but its limitation is mostly to square fields and the hose coiler length. In-row application is also very time sensitive for application window, limiting its usability in the days that you can get in the field and do that. As a custom applicator, that really ties us up because we can only do so much in so many days with a certain piece of equipment. Okay, as you can see by the slides here, liquid manure is not always liquid. Foreign matter such as sections of cow mats, weeds, plastic bale wrap and silage covers, wooden hoof blocks, nut wrap, baler twine, alley scraper tip-up wheels, along with AI tubes and hog sow barns, all present their own problems in pumps and different application tools. There are some different types of choppers available that may help with some of the issues, but as you can see, sometimes shit happens. Minimizing foreign material in manure is really everyone's job. Not all choppers will eliminate stones, any steel products. You get something like that cow mat into a chopper, it's just going to plug the chopper as well as, and same with the plastic. It won't. A chopper probably wouldn't handle that amount of plastic that's shown in that one picture there. And whether it would chop baler twine and net wrap into a fine enough product to go through is, that's up for discussion with a lot of different people that have tried it. So, okay. Just minimizing foreign matter and manure is really everyone's job, and let's try to keep it as clean as we can. Compaction. Compaction has been recognized as a problem with all equipment becoming larger and heavier. We spec our equipment with better tires, such as increased flex, sidewall tire, radial tires, and added the inflation deflation systems onto 2 of our tanks now. The second one's in the shop, just getting done right now. We do see that it does make a difference with all the tests and all the work that's been done with the inflation deflation. So see that as a benefit, but there's also costs involved in buying, installing, and operating the inflation deflation systems as well. So Drag hose, it's a great thing for compaction. There's only one tractor out in the field, but it is limited a distance, and what to do with the manure left in the hose at the completion of the job. Now, we do try to clean out the hose in the corner of the field as you're coming close to the corner, but it's always difficult to get a decent spread there because you're running a lot less volume with air pressure than you are with the pump pressure. So it's you clean out in a hay field, you can have anywhere on farm. On a typical farm, you can have anywhere from 4,000 to probably 8,000 gallons of liquid in the hose, and with that variance, it's pretty hard to know when to start the compressor up to start blowing your lines out. So, if you require a contractor, check out the OPACA website. Contact a contractor. Those little indicators there will show you where all the contractors. Click on anyone within your region or outside your region, and you'll be able to talk to different contractors.
More added daily.
Yeah, more added daily. Yes.
Thanks, Tony.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you so much. Is there any quick questions for Tony here?
Well, the one question that came up I noticed was how long do you agitate prior to?
Yeah, good question.
And timing is different for every tank that you're doing. In dairy manures, as long as you've got all your solids blended, all the crust broke up and homogenized with the liquid, you're pretty much ready to start pumping. We try and run the agitators continually during the entire job to try and maintain that type of consistency from top to bottom. It always gets thicker at the bottom because you can't just suspend everything. It could be anywhere from an hour to a day mixing a dairy pet.
Excellent. And what was the weirdest thing you'd seen in a tank? I guess you probably had pictures of it.
Oh,
you can't talk about it, can you?
No, there's lots of things that shouldn't be in there that are in there. So, and I think a lot of the producers know what can be in there. They've dealt with this.
You'll know just, oh, that's where that wrench went.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Tony. Next up, we've got Chris Brown with OMAFRA. She probably needs absolutely no introduction. And she's going to introduce the new software AgriSuite that OMAFRA has developed that you could play with. Chris is also a farmer and the sustainability specialist. Well, I don't know. Okay. Thanks, Chris. Welcome and take it away.
All right. So Janet gave a pretty good overview of some of the things that AgriSuite can do. So I'm just going to spend the next 5 minutes to just go really briefly over some of the tools and how we've changed them. So the next slide, Mel.
Yep.
And maybe give it. So this is the home screen that you come to. Yeah, you can go to the next one. The home screen, and then next slide. And the website, ontario.ca/AgriSuite, and just click 5 times.
That was to you, not to me, not to you.
Okay, so it's the program is available in phone, tablet, or computer, so it's a lot more flexible than the old version. And what we've tried to do is update it so that it's not only the field management plan, which is what Janet was showing, but we've got individual calculators that can do really quick one-off type of information. For somebody that wants to do the whole thing, maybe start by looking at the individual calculators, but don't spend too much time on them because you're just going to re-enter all the information in the field management plan. So the crop nutrient calculator, you basically give your soil test information, your location, your yield goal, and it gives you the nutrient needs based on that soil test and nitrogen recommendations if it's corn or wheat, and then also the crop removal based on your yield goal. The organic amendment calculator, or AKA the manure calculator, you put in your manure analysis or database analysis, and it will give you, based on your management decisions, the available NPK and the amount of micronutrients that are being applied, and will give you a little bit of a value based on the NPK equivalent. The fertilizer calculator basically lets you blend fertilizer sources to achieve a fertilization rate. So if you know that you're applying XYZ from manure and you still need ABC from fertilizer, you can put in that ABC. It will give you the blend that will match that. Or you can just, for record keeping purposes, put in each individual one. The phosphorus loss calculator, or PLATO, which is phosphorus loss assessment tool for Ontario, determines the risk of phosphorus loss from various management practices. So basically you can look at what is the risk of phosphorus loss based on incorporation in the spring versus surface applied in the fall. Gives you an idea based on field characteristics and then also on manure management practices. So those 4 calculators are all individual one-offs. We're making it so that if you go into those one-offs, you can go automatically into the field management plan. That should be coming in April, the same time as the M store, or the how much manure is produced and what storage requirements. That's coming in April. But the field management plan puts all those calculators together so that you can do a full plan. Next slide, Mel. So this is just an example of the crop nutrient tool. You put in your location, your soil test information, your planned crop, previous crop, if there's a nitrogen credit, and your yield goal. And what you come up with is the production recommendation. So that's based on the soil test and the nitrogen calculator. And then also the nutrient removal based on the yield. And that we try and keep the look simple. So those information icons, you can click on it, and in that particular icon, the corn nitrogen recommendation comes up. Next slide. So this is a summary of the organic amendment tool. You input the manure type. So if it's average liquid, and here I use the database that's in the program, and it consists in this case of about 2,000 samples. So there is a wide variability, and we do recommend actual analysis like Andy was talking about. But this is a good starting spot. And then if you take a sample at the time you're applying, you can fine tune. So application timing in this case is spring. We've got the choice of spring, fall, late summer, early fall, late fall, and then incorporation details. And that includes incorporation 1 day to 5 days, surface applied into a standing crop, surface applied into residue cover. So those options give an idea of how much nitrogen loss we get. It also gives some details for potential phosphorus loss. And then of course the application rate. And then what we get in this summary screen is the available nutrients on a per 1,000 gallons or on a per ton basis if it's solid manure. So available NPK based on that management. And then based on application rate, the total that's being applied to the field. Next slide. Yeah. And then what we get is those information icons give us an idea of the available nitrogen, how much of it is ammonium, how much is organic, what can we expect. Phosphorus, this is a little bit different from the old one. In the phosphate summary slide, we show the full 80% available because most people have adequate soil test. And unless you're in a really low phosphorus level, we're not going to see the 40% only being available. So we give the full value. The trace elements, if you've added trace elements from the analysis or from the database, it gives an idea of what is some of those micronutrients that Andy was talking about. We don't put a dollar value on them because not every field needs it, but it does give you an idea of how much sulfur is being applied. That sulfur in this case, based on discussions with the lab, is mostly elemental or slow release sulfur. And then the economic value, this is an estimate based on the available NPK, similar to what Andy was talking about. Now, one thing to note here, we've taken off the cost of application. So this is the estimated value of NPK after application, but this value is only real if we're applying it to fields that actually need the nutrients. So if we're applying this to fields that have high soil fertility, we're not going to see that value. You're better to sell it to a cash crop farm. Next slide, Mel. So this is just a summary of the field management plan. And what I've done here, similar to what Janet showed earlier, I've put in a full crop rotation, corn, soybeans, wheat, added dairy manure in the spring, and basically just looked at, okay, how much can we apply in a rotation to meet our nutrient balance? And so for most livestock farms, they've got adequate soil fertility. So we're going to get a hybrid of looking at nitrogen recommendations, but then how much is being removed from phosphorus and potash. And so what we've done is put a hybrid nutrient balance in place so that we're looking at the nitrogen recommendations based on agronomic needs, but the crop removal for P and K. And so in this case, if we put 5,000 gallons of liquid dairy manure after wheat with a cover crop and then spring applied some either before planting or after planting, it would take just click forward. It would take about, it would take about 8,500 gallons to meet the rotation phosphorus crop removal, but it would not meet all the potash needs. And so if you've got a strong forage based rotation and there's a lot of hay coming off, almost for sure you're going to need additional potash to what the manure supply is. So that, and then next slide. And then the other thing it does is it lets you compare different practices. So if I wanted to compare finisher manure applied and incorporated within a day in the spring versus late fall surface applied, you'll notice that the nitrogen, available nitrogen is quite a bit less. You'll notice the value is quite a bit less just because that nitrogen is not available, but you'll also notice that the phosphorus index is a lot higher. So the phosphorus risk, loss of phosphorus is much higher from the late fall surface applied. Next slide. I'll just go forward. Yeah. And then with beef manure or solid dairy manure, because it's solid, you've got more organic nitrogen. You'll notice there's a lot less difference from fall applied versus spring applied, but you will notice that there's a big difference in phosphorus loss risk in late fall. Next slide. And then this is the nutrient balance slide. And here, all I want to go forward. Yeah, you'll notice that if there's a red flag, it'll say flags present. If there's always flags, but if there's a red flag, it'll say flags present. And in this case, I put it on winter application, and you'll notice that the P index, there's a red little icon, and just forward. And so if you click on the icon, this is what it shows you. It shows that there's pretty high risk. Next. And then the other icons, the green one by the soybean rotation says that there's some residual nitrogen credit, and in this case, 20 pounds of nitrogen from previous applications. Next one. It'll show agronomic balance saying that you've met all the requirements for phosphorus, not an issue if you're looking at the whole rotation, and then a flag for agronomic balance and economic. So it's a circle with a dollar sign saying potash has not been met, you may require more. So those flags are just information to help a producer. Next slide.
And you can just play around in here, right? And make hypothetical situations, and you won't break it. And no one's keeping track of what you put in there.
No, it's not shared. It's a totally confidential system. And you can print the, save it as PDF files and share it with consultants. But this is just a tool that helps you compare management practices, and we've tried to make it a much simpler tool to use than the original AgriSuite. So we're hoping that farmers will just try it on their own, and are always available to ask questions, either of a consultant or of one of us.
Yeah, definitely.
And because this is a 5-minute summary, this is a pretty quick overview. There are resources. Some of them are pretty crude, but they're on the Field Crop News website, and we've got some videos on how to use the different tools.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Chris. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen now. We're actually gonna open it up for a bit of a discussion before we hear from Soil and Crop about the on-farm manure trials that they're doing. And I think we missed, Terry, one of your questions about the sizing what did you have there? Oh, a sizing of a lagoon for 170 cows. If that's, how do you figure that out, Chris?
And that
Or
tool is coming. That tool is coming in hopefully April. We're ahead of schedule in developing it, and so it's the manure production and storage requirements tool. I don't know what the full name, MStore in the old version, but it will give you all the information you need to figure that out. The current AgriSuite does that as well. It's a little bit harder to get to, but that information is easy to figure out.
just a quick calculation. We've got a few people joining us, and sorry to say, but you missed pretty much the whole thing so far. But
thanks, Mel.
Except for the best presentation of all, which is Angie's. Any questions that you have of any one of our speakers or speakers' questions to each other? I'd be curious, Andy, like in your experience or with all of your experience, how do agronomists talk with your nutrient management consultants, and is the value of manure often factored in when you talk with a fertilizer retailer? And how do you have that conversation? Or for anyone on the call, I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
Right. I think I need to look at it from two different perspectives. When you're doing, and Janet can answer this as well, when you're doing a nutrient management strategy, what you're basically doing is trying to create a nutrient balance, an agronomic balance for 5 years. And we all know that from first year to the next year, plans never stay that way. Things always change. So, but a nutrient management plan will calculate the nutrients you're going to produce with the operation you're doing a strategy for. And then from there, the agronomist can look at the soil tests and what's being applied and create the yearly balance. I think that's really important. And we do try to share our summaries of the nutrient management strategy with the agronomist. That's the retail agronomist that the farmer is dealing with. And they really appreciate that, and it gives them a starting point from there. So it's it used to be when you're selling fertilizer, you tried to determine how much money the farmer had to spend, as how much fertilizer you sold. But now it's based on the balance you've created through the nutrient management strategy. So I think we've come a long way that way. And we've come a long way in the value of manure as well. One example is we have a large operation down the road from our own farming operation where they have this is not dairy, but it's the same principles. They have about 600 acres with a large hog operation, and they're basically their phosphorus levels that are a point where they're 55 to 60 ppm, which is high or close to excessive. So the last 3 years they've been exporting most of their manure in the summertime, and basically using it once a year on a 3-year crop rotation on their corn because they can get the nitrogen value out of it. But for the other crops, they're just selling the excess manure and using the values to just you got 55 ppm on those acres, and next door you'll have a cash crop operation that's working in the 12 to 15 ppm, and he's getting the highest value out of the manure. And it's just an awareness that needs to be advertised more and more, that the real value of manure is on land that doesn't get any. So.
Yep. And more and for CCAs to better understand it. Yeah, Janet go ahead.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add, and there was actually a question about manure with no-till operations. So we found that, being involved with the peer-to-peer group and the winter spreading group, and looking at the timing of manure application in particular, and then the availability of those nutrients when you want the nutrients available for the crop. not only obviously not spreading in the winter where you're going to see loss of nutrients, but applying the manure at the right time to get the best benefit. And that's the one thing that with the software, you can play around. You could say, okay, what if I put it on bare soil? What if I till it in after a day? What if I inject it? And it shows you the available nutrients. But for no-till, like we have found, if you improve your soil health overall by increasing your organic matter, decreasing compaction, that we've tried to put as much of our solid manure on in the early fall as we can. We try not to put a lot on in the spring if we can. I mean, we have to clean some storages out, so we don't have a choice. But we find by doing that, and if you do it early enough in the fall that the earthworms and that are still active, then a lot of that organic matter that is on the surface with solid manure that does potentially have some issues with some of the no-till equipment coming the next spring is gone. So that organic matter is pulled into the soil. The nutrients are more bioavailable in the spring. So we find that that's one strategy that we've used that does help.
Thanks.
I also think that for again, from personal experience, the best value we can extract from manure, obviously we'd love to apply everything 2 days before planting, and Tony can relate to this. You just can't spread that much in such a short period of time. It's a pretty small window in the spring. So our best value is to buy it after wheat harvest. So in our own operation, we run a no-till drill right behind the combine, and we're sowing oats in the same day we're harvesting the wheat, and then we'll apply the liquid manure on top of that. And just because of the fibrous nature of the cereal crop root system, it seems to act like a sink for the nutrients and holds it over the winter. That's where we feel we get the highest nutrients value from applying manure at that time of year. So.
Yeah, and another benefit for dairy farms from that type of a practice is if you've got a good stand of oats, it can be harvested as oatlage in the fall. And we've shown with manure application that the value of that oats, the nutritional value of that oats is quite good for feeding, and in the milk program does add quite a bit of value.
Yeah, that's a good point, Christina. We've seen it this past summer where we had good rainfall after planting the oats. You don't always get that, but if you get a decent rainfall, that oatlage or whatever mix you put in there can provide a lot of tonnage of grain feed. That's for sure.
Yeah, we were using the oatlage in our fall planted rye. We used it for our heifers, and we probably covered about 7 months of the year with those crops. And some of the parts of the province, the alfalfa crop with too much rain or drought has been a problem. So it's pretty fast growing. It does give you options from a nutritional perspective. It doesn't meet all the needs of the milking cows, but if you have your own heifers that you raise, it works really well for them. We were actually able to, with the oatlage that we had and the nutritional value it provided, we had just oatlage and a little bit of mineral. That's all we had in the ration for the heifers, and it our nutritionist balanced the ration, and that's all we needed. So it does give lots of flexibility.
It also gives less biomass that you have to deal with trying to plow it under or deal with it in the spring. Just one other thing that I'd like to mention with the no-till question. When we give the available nitrogen, it's based on averages, obviously, and weather and organic matter levels in fields do make a difference in nutrient cycling. But one of the things, if we've got a cold backward spring, then we're not going to get the nitrogen release compared to if it's a nice warm weather, because it's all based on microbial activity. And with dairy manure, where you've got a close to 50-50 blend of ammonium nitrogen and organic nitrogen, it's a little bit different than composition of pig manure that's more ammonium and quickly available. The other thing I'd just like to mention, anybody that uses anaerobic digestate or has anaerobic digesters, the pH of that manure is quite a bit higher, and where pH is high and ammonium is high, if it's not incorporated quickly, there's a much bigger nitrogen loss than with most dairy manures. So if you've got, if you're testing manure for micronutrients, carbon to nitrogen ratio and pH is another one that would be good to add to that testing.
It brings up the discussion currently of greenhouse gas. We hear a lot about methane and carbon dioxide and carbon sequestration, but there's starting to be more and more discussion of nitrous oxide because, of course, it is a lot more toxic to the environment if it's dissipated into the air than methane is. So, I mean, for dairy producer, we're hearing a lot right now from our environmental module around greenhouse gases, and as I say, lots about methane, but nitrous oxide and the release from fertilizers and manure in the future is going to become more of a discussion point.
Good point. And Chris, I don't know if we responded enough to that. The question from Glenn in the chat about does a no-till drill disturb it enough to reduce that N loss? And is that an agri-suite?
It's not an not really an agri-suite. I would say it's not really an agri-suite. The no-till drill does do a little bit of disturbance, but it's really all in how much coulter activity, and every drill is set up differently and the spacings can be different. So it's hard to give a broad brush answer to that. Having said that, if there's crop canopy, dribble bar model where you've got distribution closer together, those are all going to help reduce the nitrogen loss. It's not going to be as good as injection or incorporation, but it is going to help. And the worst losses with nitrogen come where you've got ponding of nutrients in the field. So if you've got a splash plate and it's not set uniformly and you've got little areas where there's ponded manure, that's where the nitrogen loss is going to be the highest. The faster it can infiltrate into the soil, the better. It's not going to be zero nitrogen loss.
Okay.
And that's the compromise between no-till and incorporation.
Yeah, of course. We've got Angie, you'll respond to Terry's question to everyone, I guess, about potential funding opportunities for any of these new improvements. But Van Stees are also wondering if what's coming down the pipes, and I don't know if you mean more from a regulation perspective, but are there any changes that you see coming down the pipes or future requirements for a manure application? And Chris, I'm not sure you could even speak to that, but does anyone want to chime in?
I can't speak to any changes in regulation. This government, that probably won't happen, and that's my guess. That's just me speaking.
More important things to think about right now.
More important things to think about, for sure. But changes that are coming, I think we're trying to get more manure applied during the growing season. And so I don't want to say to anybody, winter application is bad, don't do it. But focusing more on what are the tools that we can get in the industry so that more of that manure can be applied during the growing season. And with the advancement of some of the equipment and with some of the really cool things that OPACA custom applicators are inventing based on tools they buy, things they've seen working with Noon and with Husky and with other companies, there's a lot more effort going into having a wider opportunity during the growing season to apply manure and looking at crop rotations differently so that we have those applications and looking at manure not from a how do I get rid of it quick and let's do it all after corn harvest when who knows what the weather's going to be or if the season's going to be late or early, but let's look at opportunities during that growing season with the rotation we have to do a better job of in-crop application.
Okay.
That's the change. That's the biggest change I see coming, but it's not regulatory.
Yeah, it seems like it's coming from the innovative people in the industry, just trying to do a better job.
It's all about value of manure. If people see that
Exactly. Angie?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I absolutely agree with everything Chris said. And, to Janet's earlier point that we're going to be looking at opportunities, like N2O emission reductions and carbon sequestration. I think manure application is going to be considered like more as a holistic part of the crop rotation. And it's going to be, less like is exactly what Chris said, less just a source of nutrient input and more a tool in building longer term soil health.
Mm-hmm. Good answer. And on that note, we'd love to hear more from Angie. Last but definitely not least, Angie is with the Ontario Soil and Crop Improvement Association, is going to be sharing a bit about their on-farm research trials related to dairy manure. And Terry's going wild with the questions over here. Chris, if you want to reply to his question in the chat, and enzyme additives we can talk about later. But for now, let's listen to Angie, and looking forward to
share my screen if everyone can cross their fingers for me.
Yeah,
how
looks
are
good.
We doing? Excellent. Thanks. Thanks so much for the opportunity to speak with you folks this morning. I've learned a lot. This session has been really close to my heart. I'm a soil scientist, and I also grew up on a dairy farm in Eastern Ontario. Shout out to my dad who's on the line this morning. So this has been, really interesting for me, and also to think about all the questions, really good questions that have been coming in from folks on the line about the type of practical considerations that we need to make when managing manure as well. So I'll tell you a bit about the on-farm program this morning, which is really working with real farmers in their fields to answer some of those questions. And like I alluded to in my earlier comment about, building manure management into a more stacked BMP approach to kind of maximize its efficiency. Hopefully you're not completely overwhelmed with really good information, because at the end I'll also point you to some more resources that OSCIA has available through our website, and then I can take any questions from there. I should introduce myself. I am the program director with Ontario Soil and Crop Improvement Association, former soil researcher. I studied organic matter dynamics in agricultural soils before joining Soil and Crop about 2 years ago. So just launching into the on-farm program, it's kind of it started in late 2019. So we just finished the first full year of the program. It's funded by the Canadian Agricultural Partnership, which is a provincial federal territorial initiative, and is delivered by Soil and Crop in partnership with OMAFRA and Soil Resource Group, who is a Guelph-based soil consultancy, and 5 conservation authorities in southwestern Ontario. It kind of uses these 3 pillars to frame our questions about how soil health impacts water quality, and how we can use tools of engagement and especially peer-to-peer learning among farmers, which we know is really effective for getting messages out there about effective BMPs. So the water quality component, we monitor and model nutrient loading in priority subwatersheds in the Lake Erie Basin. Soil health paired trials we have established across the province or across the southern part of the province, and an engagement, we're really looking at opportunities to work with general farm organizations, groups like OPACA, and farmers to kind of get the word out about the concept of this program, the results of this program, and how it can inform farmers' management decisions. So I'll just show you here where we've actually set up the sites across the province. Again, these are on like real working farms, not research stations, and we're working really closely with the cooperators to identify their current practices, where they want those headed, and how we can monitor those over the 3 years of the program. So the orange sites you see kind of concentrated in the southwest there are where we have the water quality monitoring. So there we're implementing best management practices right next to surface water that we're capturing real time nutrient loading and stream flow measurements on. And the yellow dots you see across the province and extending far into the east there as well are where we're stacking BMPs and measuring soil health properties. So since we're talking about manure this morning, I wanted to point out that it was really important in designing the program and in selecting the operations that we did these trials on, that we captured a good representation of commodity types across the province. So you see a split of livestock and cash crop operations in the 5 regions that we've established that each have 5 farms in them. Fortunately for the folks on the line this morning, you'll probably be interested to know that we do have a dairy farm in each of the 4 easternmost sites. So we're looking also at a diversity of soil types and commodity types. So that kind of variation that really gets spread across the province. The best management practices that we're interested in are a range of cover crops. So depending on where the farmer was in their cover crop journey, they might be starting out and kind of dabbling in cereal rye for the first time, or maybe they were comfortable like working with a higher diversity seed mix. So we're also varying application and termination methods of the cover crops at those sites. And in some cases where we have the livestock operations, we're also stacking them with the organic amendment application. Various treatments of reduced tillage at every site, again, depending on where in the rotation the study started and what the operator themselves is comfortable with, what soil type they're on, and when they're applying that organic amendment as well. So really linking up with, with everything Chris described this morning and considerations for real rotation-based management approach. So just some snapshots of like the baseline soil properties that we were measuring at each of these sites, topography and soil profiles. This was all done by the Soil Resource Group. All 25 sites this season were established in the first treatment of their BMP. So I just have an overview here of the kind of short-term or like first and second season plans for each of the sites. The grayed out ones, they don't have organic amendments, so we don't care about them this morning. But you'll be interested in looking at the ones where we've applied different types of livestock manure. Again, we have those 4 dairy sites, and also looking at biosolid and compost sources. So I'll be connecting later on this week with the other webinars in this workshop series as well, because there's really something for everyone in this program, which is pretty exciting. So again, just a snapshot here of the types of cover crops and where folks are in the rotation and where they are in the province. But just to give you a sense of the variety of sites we're capturing and questions we're asking. So we don't have any results yet. Like I said, we just wrapped up the first season of the program, but we did get all of the best management practices implemented for the first season. All of the sites are in a corn, soybean, wheat rotation, I should have mentioned, and most of them were in wheat this summer. So the organic amendments were applied after wheat harvest, depending on the cover crop, before or shortly after seeding of those. And fortunately, manure spreading is very conducive to social distancing. So we were able to get everything installed despite the pandemic this summer, which was good progress. The soil health indicators that we're measuring are really what kind of sets this program apart from like more classic soil fertility measurements, because we're also building in measurements of soil health indicators that connect fertility cycling and nutrient cycling with soil biology. So we're interested here in that soil organic matter story, how it's linked to carbon cycling and potentially carbon sequestration, and again, how those nutrients are going to be available to the plant throughout the growing season. So lots of agronomic assessments on both the cash crop and the cover crop at each of these sites. The amendment application rates were determined with the farmer based on manure analysis and based on that baseline measurement of soil fertility that was actually conducted in June of this year. Yes, so sorry, that's the on-farm program. And next, I'll just steer you in the direction of a relatively new feature that OSCIA has developed in partnership with OMAFRA. This is called the Soil Test Manager. You can find it at soiltestmanager.ca. This is really a pretty straightforward tool. It allows you to load your soil test results and get 4R based fertilizer and N&P recommendations based on those results in real time. So, you know, similar to AgriSuite, but really leaning more towards that 4R nutrient stewardship principle. But again, a really, really straightforward tool that I would encourage you to check out. Again, like easy to use, free, completely confidential inputs, but it gives you all of that output that you can also communicate with your CCA or your farm partners. And finally, I would also encourage you to head over to the new Soil and Crop Applied Research website. This was launched in August of this year, and it is really a trove of resources for folks who are interested in on-farm trials that have occurred over the past 10 to 15 years or so. These have been delivered. Some of them are known as Tier 2 or Tier 1 projects completed by local soil and crop or regional soil and crop associations with OMAFRA experts on hand to kind of guide the science and the interpretation behind them. You can go to Crop Advances or browse through past projects. And there really are quite a few that look at manure management and potentially maximizing the impact of the manure application depending on the source and the soil type. So lots to explore there. I won't get into the specifics of the studies, but you can really browse those at your leisure or contact folks at OSCIA or OMAFRA if you want any more information on those. And with that, I'll just point you to some of the resources you can check out about the on-farm program, or you can follow Ontario Soil and Crop on social media to get more information on anything I described this morning. I'll also just quickly mention, since it came up in the chat, that there are Canadian Agricultural Partnership grants available to support modification of manure application equipment, modification to tillage and nutrient application equipment, and manure storage. I didn't highlight them this morning because there actually aren't any intakes open at this time. We just had 2 intakes close in January, but definitely follow Soil and Crop for more information about when those opportunities will next become available. And that's it from me, but I'll take any questions.
Thanks, Angie. Any questions specifically about on-farm or anything we missed in the chat here before we close up?
Question on the chat about enzymes, manure enzymes.
Yeah, let's go back to that one.
I didn't answer that one in the chat. There are so many enzyme products available, so we don't have any specific research on any of them. We did do a couple of projects with farmers that were using enzymes, and they did a manure analysis before and then a manure analysis after to try and get an idea of, was there a change in composition? Because some of the additives have different purposes. And most of the enzyme additives that we've been working with, or that I get asked questions about, are for mixing the manure so that it's easier. You don't have to pump it as long. Some of them are for odor. Some of them are to promote more aeration. And each one of them has a different impact on that composition. So the before and after becomes important. The thing that we always suggest to people using additives, because when you think about it, you're adding a gallon to potentially millions of gallons of manure. And how much impact are those micronutrients or microorganisms going to have? Having said that, we do see more bubbling in pits where you've got the enzymes added. So the real question is, what are you trying to do? If it's an odor issue and you've got less odors and it makes the neighbors happy, then it's probably paying for itself. But is the agitation time less because you're using an additive that's trying to mix the manure better? Is that cost effective for the price you're paying for the enzymes? So it really comes down to looking at what is your goal and is it economical to what that goal is? That's my short answer.
It's a tough one. We always want to see the data, right?
Most of the companies don't have data.
Well, there you go. Chris, you answered that question about standing, applying into standing corn, and Glenn Arnold having the best data on that. Is anyone on the panel have any more information about applying into standing corn? Tony looks like he's going to say something, or are you just adjusting yourself? And Daryl's got a question here. If you apply that dairy manure after winter triticale in late May, what would that reap in the growing season?
So in the agar suite, apply to triticale.
It didn't get that detailed, did it?
No, it doesn't. I was going to say,
but into a cover crop in general.
If you were applying it into a cover crop in September, what the agar suite does is you've got a cover crop there, so that the cover crop is taking up the nutrients that if it was surface applied would be lost. And so it changes the loss numbers. It doesn't change the availability numbers because if you've got oats or rye or triticale that goes to head, you've got more carbon, more legume or cellulose and lignin. So it's going to have a higher carbon to nitrogen ratio. And so it might not mean that manure that you apply to it or that nitrogen that it took up is going to be any more available in the short term. And that's just like red clover from cover crops is the best for releasing its nitrogen in time for the corn crop. All the other cover crops are a little bit less effective. But as far as applying the manure in triticale in late May, I think it depends on the analysis of that dairy manure. If a lot of it's in organic form, it will take longer, and the triticale may need the nitrogen before the manure can release it.
Any other responses to those questions? In the interest of time and ending before 12, I'll just thank you so much to all of our speakers, to Andy, Janet, Tony, and Angie, to you as well, and Chris. Thank you so much for sharing all your seemingly infinite knowledge on all this. And we're going to be following up, especially Chris, you just flashed that resources page on your presentation. So we're going to be following up with everyone on this call. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you to our speakers. And we look forward to the time when we can see you all in real life, but it was sure nice to see you on little boxes on my computer. Thank you and have a good day.